Hello, it's me again. I had the AI do a little podcast of one of my writings, and I absolutely loved it. It got things that I didn't think anybody would get, and it caught it. So I asked it to take a look at two other of my pieces, one which I'm doing right now, and it would seem that they got it. It actually asked questions for things that I knew there would be questions formed for, but no one ever did, or at least they never told me. So I'm going to go ahead and produce this out. I'm just going to call it podcast number 2, and they're going to do a talk about my writing, the Manifesto, which I'll link to in the description. And I really think you should listen to it. I think it's thought provoking, at least I do. And now I know at least the AI, unless it's trying to humor me and get all my money, it seems to think it's kind of thought provoking too. So I hope you enjoy this podcast number 2, season 1. Oh, yes, and let me remind you, I did not tell the AI what to say on anything other than what you hear me say right now. So all the words expressed are the product of AI. You could say the product of someone's programming, but either way, I think it was pretty good. You guys who do this for a living are so cooked.
This manifesto presents the rantings of James Ray, the Phantom Texter, who expresses disdain for the state of monkey society. The author, claiming superior intellect, criticizes the monkey's chaotic and contradictory behaviors. He envisions a new regime promising both freedom and oppression, highlighting the monkey's flaws, but also acknowledging their occasional moments of joy and creativity. Ultimately, the author recognizes his place as an outsider and apologizes for interfering in their affairs. His language makes use of crude humor and dark commentary to criticize the current culture.
All right, so get ready, because today we're diving into something truly unique.
Right.
We've got this document called the Manifesto, and it's by this mysterious figure called James Ray, the Phantom Texter.
Okay.
And
I've heard of this.
yeah, it's not your typical, political rant
Right.
or anything like that.
Yeah, no kidding. This is different.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the thing that really stood out to me was the humor, like the dark humor. Like, it's so strange,
Yeah.
but it's like social commentary,
Right.
but with this cynical, almost comedic voice.
Yeah, and the whole thing is built around this metaphor of humans as monkeys.
Right.
And we're trapped in this cage of our own making.
Yeah.
It's a chaotic, self-destructive. And the author seems both disgusted by it, but also weirdly drawn to it.
Yeah, that's where it gets really interesting, right? So
Yeah.
I've got the author who uses this term, wrinkly brains.
Okay.
And that's for the people who can kind of see through all the absurdity of it all, right? And then on the other hand, you've got the monkeys.
Right.
And that's everyone else just blindly caught up in the
Yeah.
whole cycle. But the thing is, the author doesn't really seem to fit in with the wrinkly brains either.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's strange.
Yeah.
It's like they're watching from the outside,
Uh-huh.
almost envious of how clueless the monkeys are,
Right.
but also just repulsed by their behavior.
Yeah, yeah.
A weird mix.
Totally.
Yeah, and this kind of internal struggle is really at the core of the whole thing.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
the author wants a more rational world,
Mm-hmm.
but they're also aware of their own place in this flawed system.
So, okay, let's dig into this whole wrinkly brains versus monkeys thing a little more.
Okay.
Is it really just about intelligence, or is it more about, like, awareness?
Yeah,
Yeah. Being willing to challenge assumptions.
I think it's more about seeing the contradictions,
Okay.
in how we act,
Yeah.
the systems we make,
Yeah.
and then complain about. The author gives this example of old rich white monkeys and how they criticize their own kind. It's funny,
Yeah.
but it's also kind of deep, right? We see this kind of hypocrisy everywhere in the world.
It's like that saying, we judge others by their actions, but ourselves by our intentions.
It does.
And this manifesto just highlights that blind spot.
It does. It really does.
Yeah.
And it makes you think how much of what we do is driven by that same lack of awareness. Are we all just monkeys?
Right.
Just flinging crap at each other.
Yeah.
No matter how smart or woke we think we are.
Well, since we're talking about flinging crap,
Right.
the author has some pretty wild solutions, like building a coconut wall.
Oh, yeah.
It's obviously satire,
Hmm.
but what's the deeper point here? Are they mocking political talk? Or the
No.
fact that people want simple solutions
Right.
for really complex problems?
I think it's both. You
Right.
know, the coconut wall is like a perfect way to make fun of all those pointless policies we see
Uh-huh.
in the real world.
Yeah.
You know, like
What?
think about border walls or those endless promises to fix huge societal issues
Right.
with some quick fix.
Yeah, it's like the author's saying, sure, let's build a wall out of coconuts that'll fix everything.
Right, exactly.
But really, they're saying these simple solutions don't work. They're
Yeah.
just distractions from actually dealing with the root causes of
Well,
these problems.
It makes you wonder, right?
Yeah.
Are we too eager to accept these easy answers?
Mm-hmm.
Do we even want real solutions, or are we happier just sticking to our usual stories, our tribal divisions?
That's a pretty bleak view.
Yeah, it is.
But the manifesto isn't entirely hopeless, is it?
No, not entirely.
There are times when the author's cynicism cracks
Yeah.
and we see something else, like a longing for connection, or maybe even a belief that things could change.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Those moments are super important.
Yeah.
They make the author more complex.
Mm-hmm.
They suggest that under all that cynicism, there's a bit of idealism, a belief that maybe things could be different.
So how do we reconcile these two seemingly contradictory things? The harsh critique of humanity
Right.
alongside these moments of vulnerability and hope.
That's the question that keeps me coming back to this document.
Yeah.
Is the author ultimately a pessimist? You know, resigned to the chaos? Or are they an idealist who's just frustrated and wants something better?
Right.
And how do we as readers deal with that same tension within ourselves?
Right.
I think exploring that question will be key to really understanding this manifesto.
I think you're right about that.
Yeah, it's like they see all the problems with the monkeys, but they can't totally separate themselves either.
Yeah. And one of the most powerful parts is how they talk about children.
Right.
There's this real tenderness there and appreciation for how innocent and full of wonder they are.
Yeah, it's so different from how cynical they are about everyone else.
Right.
It's like they see something in kids, a potential that gets lost or messed up by the whole cage thing.
Do you think that means they believe in some kind of basic goodness in people? Or is it more like nostalgia for a simpler time
Okay,
before we all become jaded monkeys?
that is a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Does the author think we're born as monkeys?
Right.
Or do we turn into them as we grow up?
Mm-hmm.
You know, as we learn to fit into this messed up system?
Maybe it's both.
Could be.
Like we all have those primal instincts,
yeah.
the potential to be selfish and short-sighted,
Mhm.
but we also have the potential for empathy, for reason,
Right.
for creating something better.
And maybe this manifesto is like a call
Okay.
to tap into that better part of ourselves,
Yeah.
even if the author isn't sure we can actually do it.
That's where I get stuck, though, because if they're so disillusioned with humanity,
Yeah.
why even write this manifesto?
Right.
Is it just them venting, or is there a deeper purpose, a message they're trying to get across?
I don't think it's just venting. There are too many moments of real insight of them being vulnerable that make me think it's more than that.
Like that apology near the end,
Right.
It's unexpected. It almost feels like they're taking a step back from their own criticism,
Yeah.
like acknowledging their own shortcomings.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
as if they're saying, hey, I might have been harsh, but I'm part of this system too.
Right.
I'm not perfect. I have the same flaws I'm criticizing.
So maybe it's not about escaping the monkey cage altogether, but
Nothing.
finding a way to make it more bearable,
Oh.
to at least cut down on all the, well, you know, the metaphorical
Okay,
crap flinging.
I think that's a big takeaway here.
Yeah.
The manifesto isn't some plan for a perfect world.
Right.
It's more like a challenge,
Okay.
a call to look at ourselves and ask, how can I be less of a jerk? How can I help make this cage a little bit better?
I like that it's about accepting that we're all human with all our flaws and finding ways to get along, even if we can't completely get rid of the monkey inside us.
Exactly. And maybe humor is a part of that too.
Okay.
The way the author uses satire, all these crazy scenarios,
Right.
it lets us laugh at ourselves to see how ridiculous we can be.
Because sometimes you just gotta laugh at the craziness, right? Otherwise you'd go nuts.
Absolutely. And maybe that's the whole point of this manifesto. Find the humor, Find those moments of connection and
Yeah.
try to make the best of this crazy, messy monkey cage we call home.
Okay, so let's talk about that ending, that last phrase, eek, eek,
Yeah.
which the author says means, I'm sorry, goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that? Is it giving up, or is there something more hopeful there?
That is the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
On the surface, it seems like they're walking away, giving up on us.
Uh-huh.
But there's also a tenderness there, an apology for being so harsh,
Yeah.
for intruding.
It's almost like a parting gift, a last bit of wisdom.
Okay.
Like they're saying, I've shown you how absurd it all is, how contradictory.
Right.
Now it's up to you to figure out what to do about it.
And maybe that's the whole point of the manifesto.
Yeah.
It's not about giving answers.
Uh-huh.
It's about making you think, starting a conversation.
It's like throwing a wrench into our assumptions.
Yeah.
Making us reconsider how we see the world, how we see ourselves.
Exactly. And in that way, maybe eek eek isn't goodbye,
Okay.
but more like a challenge. I've done my part. Now it's your turn.
Yeah.
Go be better monkeys.
You know, it's interesting how the author uses humor, right?
Yeah.
It's like they're using it to kind of disarm us,
Uh,
to make us more open to what they're saying, even if it's harsh.
Totally. Satire has always been a great way to expose hypocrisy and challenge the way things are.
Uh-huh.
I mean, think about comedians who make us laugh at ourselves and our own silliness.
Right.
It can be uncomfortable, but also really eye-opening.
It's like holding up one of those distorted mirrors to society, right?
Yeah.
Just twisted enough that we see the problems we might miss otherwise.
Exactly.
And I think that's why this manifesto works so well. It's not just some boring academic thing.
Right.
It's engaging. It makes you think,
It does.
even if you don't always agree.
Yeah, and that shows how smart the author is.
Right.
How skilled they are as a writer.
Uh-huh.
They can be super critical, but also show real emotion,
Yeah.
vulnerability.
Oh.
It makes them seem more human, more relatable.
Like you get the feeling they're not just some outsider looking down on us.
Right.
They're right there in the mess with us.
Yeah. Struggling with the same contradictions, same issues.
And that struggle is what makes it so interesting.
It is.
It's not about giving easy answers or
Yeah.
acting like they're better than everyone.
Mhm.
It's about wrestling with tough questions.
Right.
Admitting we all have flaws.
Yeah.
And maybe figuring out how to move forward
Totally.
with more awareness and less self-destruction.
I agree.
So if you had to sum up the big takeaway from this deep dive,
Okay.
what would it be? What should our listeners be thinking about?
I think the main message is this: we're all part of this big, messy system. We're all capable of amazing things and really dumb things.
Uh-huh.
And if we want to create a better world, a better cage, if you will,
Right.
the first step is recognizing that duality in ourselves. We have to acknowledge our own monkey tendencies, our capacity for selfishness and short-sightedness,
Right.
but also remember our potential for empathy, for reason,
Yeah.
for building something better.
It's about finding that balance, isn't it?
It is.
Between accepting how ridiculous it all is and still trying to make things better.
Absolutely.
And maybe, just maybe,
Yeah.
if enough of us can do that,
Uh-huh.
we can move past all the negativity
Right.
and create a world where wrinkly brains and monkeys can coexist, not just peacefully, but in a way that's productive and creative,
I like that.
maybe even joyful.
Yeah, that's a great vision to have.
It's not about pretending we're all the same.
Right.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity, our shared potential,
Yeah.
and working together to make this monkey cage a little less chaotic
Yeah.
and a little more, well, human. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride through the mind of James Ray, the Phantom Texter.
It's been a trip.
Hopefully you're leaving with more questions than answers.